Now, yeah, okay, good. My name is Lina Kasianidou, and I am the former director of the Archaeological Research Unit. So it is a pleasure to be a chair of the first session of the workshop. As noted in the introduction to the conference, which you will find in the printed program, the study of purple dye production offers a dynamic field for new research. Developments in maritime archaeology and the increasing application of specialized field methodologies and laboratory techniques have resulted in a wealth of new data and fresh approaches to the older material. These results can now be added to the rich collection of ancient written sources describing the process. However, with the new evidence come particular challenges, and this is the aim of this workshop, the challenges that we need to address. So the workshop on the materiality of the purple dye production, which is, as you have already heard, jointly organized by the Archaeological Research Unit and the INSTAP East Crete Study Center, will place primary emphasis on the archaeological remains of purple dye production and use and the importance of context when interpreting these remains. It is also an opportunity to promote detailed presentations of new or little-known case studies from Cyprus and the Aegean, spanning a broad chronological scope from prehistory to the late Roman period. And this second day is dedicated exactly to the presentations of new material from the Aegean and Cyprus, and it's a really great pleasure to welcome a number of colleagues from Greece, many of whom have only been here for the first time. And this is, I think, already makes the conference a big success. Now, the first speaker of the day was going to be David Rees, who was going to present a survey of shell purple dye production and use in the eastern half of the Mediterranean. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, David Rees could not be with us today. So instead, I have been asked to present briefly the work of the Archaeological Research Unit, and Tom Brogan will then present the INSTAP East Crete Center, and then we'll continue with a normal program. So, the University of Cyprus is actually one of the youngest universities in Europe. We are just going to celebrate our 30th anniversary this year. And it's a thriving new academic institution. We have been doing very well with rankings. This is the latest of the, it's the 2019 of Times Higher Education World University Rankings for young universities, and we rank 67, so it's quite a feat. This is our new library. It's a building that was designed by the French architect Jean Nouvel. It was built with a very generous grant by the Stelios Ioannou family, and it's called the Stelios Ioannou Learning Resource Center. If you have an opportunity to visit, it's really quite an astonishing place, and it's already changed the mentality of the people here. It has been embraced not by the students and the faculty, but also by everyone in Cyprus who use it and have found a place where they can go and work and study. The University of Cyprus has 8 faculties and 22 departments. We are in the Faculty of Letters, the Department of History and Archaeology, and within that department is the Archaeological Research Unit. Here we are, the Archaeological Research Unit. We are outside the campus of the university, but we are housed in this beautiful building, which is walking distance from the museum, and we're very fortunate to have our own library within the building, so it's easier to work and do research. When the university was in the very beginning, and the Archaeological Research Unit was the first research unit of the university. Now we have 11 research units. And the thought behind why the university should start with an archaeological research unit is described in the recommendation by the interim committee of the university. And the suggestion says, Cyprus is offered for primary research in the field of archaeology thanks to its distinctive cultural signature and history, as well as due to the fact that Cypriot archaeology and archaeological research on the island already has a distinguished tradition and international reputation. This is, of course, the Department of Antiquity, which has always been active in archaeological research and study of archaeology on the island. The second reason, the subsequent international recognition of the importance of archaeological research on Cyprus should comprise one of the first incentives for choosing the University of Cyprus as a center for postgraduate studies, and will pave the way for the exchange of students and academics between the University of Cyprus and academic institutions overseas. So almost 30 years later, not quite yet, this is one of our family photographs in one of our events. We have been working hard to achieve the goals that were set by this initial suggestion. And we have been, of course, teaching and doing research at the same time. The first archaeologist and founder of the Archaeological Research Unit is Professor Vasos Karagiorgis, who was here with us today, who was then followed by Dimitris Michailidis, and it's during Dimitris Michailidis' directorship that the Archaeological Research Unit grew and achieved an international recognition. We are 10 members of faculty at the Archaeological Research Unit, and we cover from prehistory and protohistoric archaeology with Maria Iakovou and Rania Kouka, classical archaeology with Yorgos Papasavas, maritime archaeology with Stella Demestija, Byzantine archaeology with Maria Parani and Thanasis Vionis, Western art with Michalis Olympios, and I teach archaeological sciences and environmental archaeology. Last year, we were very fortunate to receive an endowed chair by the Silvia Ioannou Foundation on Digital Humanities, and as of September 2019, Apostolos Saris, who many of you know, has joined the faculty and is now at the University of Cyprus with the aim of creating this new field, which is very promising and is one of the fields that we were missing. So we are grateful to the Silvia Ioannou Foundation for offering us this opportunity. Oops. And of course, what we have been doing is training the new generation of archaeologists in the field, in the classroom and in the field, with new techniques and old traditional techniques, from survey to archaeology, underwater and on the ground. And our students are doing very well. Most of them go on to do a graduate course, often overseas. We push them to go and continue overseas, and some of them come back to work with us. And this is some of the excursions that we have done on Cyprus. And we have a very dynamic group of postdoctoral researchers who have been working very hard and are producing a lot of good work. Some of them are our graduate students, Artemis, whom you may meet now, Stella and Mary Dikomitou were both undergraduate students of ours who went off to do their studies abroad. Andreas Haralambous came to us from the University of Thessaloniki. So this is our building. The building was actually bought and renovated by the Levendis Foundation. This is what it used to look like in the 30s. It was a fashion atelier. You can see the mannequins. And this was then went through different life stories. It was a gynecological clinic. The last before we got it, it was a ladies' club for cards, and then it became an academic institution. It was bought and renovated and given to the University of Cyprus by the Levendis Foundation. This is the inauguration of the building by the late Dinos Levendis. And we're very grateful to the Levendis Foundation, who has been supporting us throughout all these years. We have one of the best libraries, archaeological libraries on the island, the other two being the Cyprus American Archaeological Research Institute's library and the Department of Antiquities library. So between the three of us, one can really work and do research very well here. We also have equipment and laboratories for material analysis, for survey, and for underwater excavations. We have a very large collection of reference material, from rocks and minerals to environmental, charcoal, and archaeometallurgy. And we have a small collection of antiquities. This is the collection of antiquities you will see upstairs. It belonged to the former president of the Republic, Glafkos Kliridis. And more recently, we received another donation of Cypriot antiquities from an American university that belonged to the owner of the Cyprus Mines Corporation. And they decided that it would be a good idea for the collection to come back. And we're now working with the Department of Antiquities to repatriate about 260 objects. We have been very active in research programs, funded both from European funding and from the Research Promotion Foundation and from the University of Cyprus. We have had 4 Marie Curie projects, which are very competitive, as you know, and many other ones. In the last 2 years, we were working to create a Center of Excellence for Archaeological Sciences. We reached the final 24 out of 208. Unfortunately, we didn't get it, but we will be reapplying, hopefully, in the future. Apart from the research projects, we have the members of the unit are very active in the field. We have excavations in Samos, directed by Urania Kouka. And of course, all these excavations are also training field schools for our students, undergraduate and graduate. Maria Iakovou's excavation at Palepafos, about which you heard yesterday. Stella de Mestija is doing underwater excavations. She's currently excavating 3 shipwrecks. One is the Mazotos shipwreck, which is a classical period. A new one has just started in the summer, is a Roman shipwreck, and she has also been excavating an Ottoman shipwreck. And Thanasis Vionis has been doing a survey in the area of Kofinu, and I've been doing, my field work is in the mining regions of Cyprus. Yoros Papasavas is working on Crete. So this is also a very important part of our work. We are also very much involved in public outreach. We believe that archaeology should not be just for archaeologists. So every Monday night during term time, we have a lecture, and this is on different subjects, not on, only on Cyprus. On Monday, we will have Pavlos Trendafilidis giving us a lecture about roads. And we're always looking for speakers, so let us know if you're visiting. We'll be happy to have you give a lecture here. We also always take part in the Researchers' Night, which is the time where we can reach the younger generation and introduce them to archaeology. We have been very active in doing conferences on all subjects. Every year we have at least 2, like this one, smaller workshops or large international conferences. And many of these have been published. And on the, I know the new books are not outside. Some of the latest ones have just come out in 2019. We were very surprised when the rankings last year came out, and archaeology, we ranked among the 150 best departments of archaeology worldwide. So what we've been doing has been registered and acknowledged. You can find more about the archaeological unit in our website. You can like us on Facebook, where we put all our events, and you can watch us on YouTube. Actually, we are streaming this live, and there is all the lectures that we do, if we have the permission of the speaker, are left on the YouTube channel so people can watch later. So thank you very much. I will also have a short video, if we have 1 minute, to show the video of the unit, and then we'll go on to Tom. Thank you.
στο Πανεπιστήμιο της Κύπρου, ερευνητική μονάδα αρχαιολογίας, όσο και διεθνώς για την προβολή της κυπριακής αρχαιολογίας, είναι τεράστιος. Ο ρόλος τον οποίο διαδραματίζει τόσο στο Πανεπιστήμιο της Κύπρου, ερευνητική μονάδα αρχαιολογίας, όσο και διεθνώς για την προβολή της κυπριακής αρχαιολογίας, είναι τεράστιος.
Thank you very much. So now I call on Tom to present the East Crete Study Center.
My paper from last. All right, so we get to look at this slide again that we started with last night. So I want to, welcome everyone back again today. So my talk will be a little bit shorter than that one. So anyway, the INSTAP Study Center for East Crete. So recently the INSTAP Study Center celebrated its 20th anniversary of operation. So we opened in 1997, so this is our 23rd year, 23rd year. This event provided a valuable opportunity to review our progress and our underlying mission. Since 1997, and you see the building, yeah. Since 1997, our foundation has worked closely with the Lasithi effort, and I'm happy to have Vili and the former and present efforts here with us today, Vili Pastolako and Christos Sofianou, of the Greek Ministry of Culture and the Institute for Aegean Prehistory, which is the umbrella group for our family of foundations, and several affiliated projects of the American School of Classical Studies to develop a comprehensive approach to excavation study and heritage management. So you'll see we're a little more specific than an institution like the Archaeological Research Unit. We really are focused on field work and supporting all kinds of field work as such, not so much with teaching. So, but really, what do we do? So, in a nutshell, the Study Center pursues complementary missions for the American School and the Institute for Aegean Prehistory, and that's really my job, is bridging those two missions, okay? Work for the American School of Classical Studies, its projects on Crete, and you see some of those listed. I think when we opened in '97, there were sort of 8 projects, 4 surveys, 4 excavations, some of them perhaps better known than others. A site like Moklos, but we've been digging for a long time. Some sites have maybe a bigger reputation, Gornia, but also very important small sites like Chrysokamino, very early metallurgical site. Anyone that works in the early Bronze Age, folks on metallurgy, Cyprus of course plays a huge role in that. Chrysokamino sets the stage for that sort of later explosion of Cypriot metallurgy in the Aegean. I think in that site we're probably importing copper ore from islands in the Western String, Sifnos and such, and Kithnos. So anyway, those are sort of the project, and with several surface surveys. One of the really fun aspects of working in this part of the island, it didn't come so clearly in the talk last night because it didn't help us, but American projects have surveyed this area. It's one of the most intensively surveyed parts of Greece. And all 4 of our major surveys have now been published. And so anytime we study something, for instance, if I have a question about material from Moklos or Gornia, and you heard us referring to sort of patterns of exchange of pottery last night, we're able to sort of contextualize the material from a site into a survey, and not just a small regional survey, quite a large survey. And that's just a huge advantage whenever you have an archaeological question. And those surveys are diachronic, so it doesn't matter if you're looking at Final Neolithic or post-Roman, Venetian, something like that. You can always contextualize your material. And that's not only been a great service for these projects, but for all of the projects working in East Crete and Central Crete. It's very nice now to see sort of settlement patterns in this region, compare them with surveys in the far eastern end of Crete, Central Crete, and the surprising thing is that they can be quite different. We have an explosion of sites, for instance, in the Middle Minoan period with the first palaces, whereas other regions are finding an explosion of sites in the late Bronze I period associated with the Second Palace period. And I think that question is really yet to be sort of balanced and addressed, why you find these different sort of emergences. Anyway, so on the one hand, we're supporting all of these projects. So the Study Center sets out first to serve as a storage facility for these American projects in East Crete. At the same time, the Foundation also serves a large number of projects on and off Crete, directed by colleagues in the Greek Ministry of Culture, Greek universities, and the foreign schools of archaeology that qualify for INSTEP funding. And so that really sets the stage. That's the difference between working for the American school and working for INSTEP. When you work for the American school, you're just supporting American school research. It's very much like the Cyprus Institute, your Archaeological Research Unit. You're training the next generation, in our case, American scholars, North American, it could be Canadian sometimes as well. Whereas our foundation is looking broadly at material culture certainly from the Paleolithic down to the foundation of the Olympic Games, so sort of prehistory, the full stretch of it. And we're not as concerned that you be an affiliated project with the American school. We just want to know that you're doing first-rate research. It can be on a site in northern Greece. It can be a site in western Turkey. It can be in Cyprus. Any place in the eastern Mediterranean that you can show links through material culture back to the broader Aegean, you would be eligible for support from the foundation. Okay? So to accomplish these goals, we partner closely with a group of foundations. And those include the INSTAP, the Institute for Aegean Prehistory, which has been in operation since 1982 and has funded hundreds of excavations. The Wiener Lab for Archaeological Science, that's based on the campus of the American School in Athens. And if you haven't had a chance to see that in the last 4 years, I highly encourage you to go back, because the building was rebuilt and reopened. When it opened in '92, it was put into the basement of the American School. We knew we wanted to support archaeological science. INSTEP thought that was something that wasn't getting its due, but at the same time, there was no real, the acceptance from the American School side was sort of lukewarm. And so we were put in the basement in 2 rooms. And I know there are some people have come through the Wiener Lab, some of them here. And it was such a great thing when Malcolm Wiener, who you see in the photograph on the upper right, was able to contribute the funding to rebuild the building on campus. And that reopened 2 or 3 years ago. And the current director is Takis Karkanis. And it's just, the new building is phenomenal. It must be one of the finest laboratories for archaeological science in the entire Mediterranean. And it's doing lots of collaborations, and we work very closely with the team. And you saw on Maria's project last night, they were identified by name, but I would say 2/3 of the people that she showed on her team had come through the Wiener Lab, either was the Wiener Lab director or fellows, and so very such. So you can see the reach that they have, and I think you could see in our paper the value of archaeological science to a project. You just can't put a number on it. If you're not doing as much as you can to collect that data, you're missing out on just a huge part of the story. And anyway, we're all greatly indebted to the support that Malcolm Wiener's given to that group. So then the third group is our institution, the Institute for the Study Center in East Crete. That came into being in '97. And then the final partner is the INSTEP Academic Press. And again, INSTEP recognized there was a change in American university presses in the 80s and 90s, and they sort of stopped committing to long-term publications, these multi-volume, these sites. We could use Comos was a classic example, where the first 3 or 4 volumes had come through, I think, Princeton, the University Press. And there was the word got out that they were no longer interested in maintaining these relationships. The University of Penn's press had done a lot of work. And so INSTEP decided to pick up the ball there, and since 2002, they have published more than 70 monographs. And Dr. Susan Ferentz is the editor of the press, the director of the press. And that has been sort of the final step. And when you look at the 4 institutions, the Institute for Prehistory provides the funding for the excavations and surveys to collect the data in the ground. The Wiener Laboratory helps you process that material and squeeze as much information as you can out of it. The INSTEP Study Center for East Crete, as you'll see here in a second, provides the laboratories and the technical staff to help people take things out of the ground and prepare it for publication. And then the press does the final step, publishing it. So the entities work as partners, and they take you through the steps necessary to take something out of the ground and bring it to publication and curation. And so that's really the genius of Malcolm's efforts with his partner Phil Betancourt, professor at Temple University. Those two, over 3.5 decades, have put together this partnership of foundations, and that's the vision behind it. Now, together these groups have funded hundreds of excavations and surveys, provided study and analysis support for it in the publication, and I think looking back on it, you're looking at support for sort of 2 generations of scholars at least. And I think that's something very exciting when you look back on the legacy. It's not just the publications on the walls here. It's not just the data that's been well curated, the sites that have been conserved, the information that's been saved and packaged, the archives that have been created, all this digital data that needs to be treasured. But it's the training and the support for generations of scholars that can now do the work that they want to do the way they want to do it. That's really what we're after. So, our primary goal has always been helping excavators prepare ancient material for study and publication, often through the press. Since 1997, so now I'm talking about the INSTEP Study Center for East Crete. Since 1997, our foundation has hosted approximately 150 projects with 1,500 members and 250 individual scholars. Since 1999, the INSTEP publication team extended these services to an even wider community of 30 to 40 more projects a year, working on Crete, the Greek mainland, islands, Cyprus, and Turkey. And I know that Rania Kuka here has received photographic services from our photographers. So when we say services, we mean technical services. So the team includes Dimitri Melanas, one of the co-organizers of the Conference for Faunal Studies, Douglas Fulman, who's in charge of our illustration department, and under him are 4 or 5 other artists that work part-time for us. Dr. Eleni Navarro, who runs our petrography lab. She's worked on, I think I just did the latest report, over 100 ceramic petrography projects in over 15 years, and those are almost all Cretan-based. We have a library now of about 8,500 petrography slides that's not only used by our team. I think we had 4 or 5 visiting scholars. We have a series of interns that work through the lab. Some have come from the research unit. So again, you've got the leaders training. We've started training the last few years interns in illustration, interns in petrography. Our conservation lab, Kathy Hall, runs right now, and we have an assistant conservator on site. We host 3 or 4 interns again. We're training, and we have 5 or so visiting conservators. So in the summer in the laboratory, there could be up to 8 conservators working simultaneously. So it gets quite busy. And each one of these teams is unfortunately, I didn't put Kronis on here. He took some of the photographs, but also Kronis Papanikolaopoulos is our photographer. Now, just to give you some idea of the scale of what these guys are doing, the artist team last year drew and digitized about 2,500 images. Dimitri worked on 6 projects, I think Eleni on 6. These guys have about 5 to 10 publications a year. Kathy and her conservation team worked on several thousand objects from over 15 projects. Eleni was working on 6. I think Doug worked for 20 projects. Crony photographed for 25 more projects, took 25,000 photographs for these projects. So it's a huge service. I think the photography lab alone, it's something in the hundreds of thousands of photographs. So this is the reach, and it varies. Every year, between the projects that we support on Crete and the projects that we support abroad, we're talking anywhere from 40 to 80 projects that are helped by this. Okay, and so the idea was to not just support, the original building was built to house and support the American School affiliated projects on Crete, but the idea was then to follow INSTAP's mission to a much wider group and to take this publication team, equipment, services. So we also send out our systems, our drones, our DGPSs, we lend out to projects. That's another 10 projects a year, borrow that equipment. So anything we can take that are services and tools that we have, you can apply for them, and we will try and send them to you, okay? And so one of the most exciting thing that's happened in the last few years, and this I can't remember who I was talking to last night about it, but when we started 22 years ago, the mission was really to support field projects. And then it was to reach out to a wider range of field projects. And now we're seeing a rapid increase in the use of the building, the research facilities, the laboratories, and the material, the legacy material that's been stored there by dissertation students. So we had 13 dissertation students last year, working half of them almost all year round. And here you see Angela Radigan from Heidelberg and Nikki Saradaki from Thessaloniki. And this has been a real change in the last 5 years, maybe in the last 8 years. We had 3 Erasmus Fellows, both as undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate Erasmus Fellows. So we're opening ourselves up as much as possible. And these groups come from, I think they come from about 10 different countries. So in no way is it an American-focused thing. If you can come and you have a project that warrants it, we will accept you as a member. And a lot of them are coming back to material that was published by our projects in the 80s, 90s, and first decade of the 2000, and they're coming back with new ideas and applying and studying new material, particularly the survey material. We've had 3 or 4 dissertation topics that have tried to squeeze new information out of the surveys. Okay? So very exciting. Now, in 2016, we developed a model that neatly summarizes the scope and framework of our work. Put simply, the Study Center pursues data collection here through the support of excavation surveys that record and collect data from regional landscapes and specific archaeological contexts. through the analysis of artifacts, through a combination of low-tech and high-tech equipment via macroscopic and microscopic investigations of organic and inorganic finds. Among the objectives are the identification of species and materials, and we've been hearing a lot about that, methods of manufacture, and the date and provenience of artifacts. So here, not only do we have some of the equipment for actually conducting the analysis, and we've just received a generous grant to purchase a portable XRF, the latest generation of XRF technology. But we also prepare samples that are then taken to other laboratories. So again, we can work as an intermediary, and so our conservators are able to prepare samples that are then taken to the Wiener Lab, laboratories of archaeological science laboratories in Europe to conduct that. And so one of the fascinating things about in our conservation department, I really have to give Kathy Hall credit here, is that, for instance, metal objects that come through the lab, they're always looking for data because they've worked on so many projects. This is one of the things the dynamic that takes place. Once you've worked for 25 projects in a 3-year period, you're exposed to a lot of different interests. So you're asked a lot of different questions. You're asked to collect material from a wide range of applications. And then once they're trained to do that, they look for it. And so before they start cleaning the pottery, before they start cleaning the metals, they're looking for these fragile pieces of data that once they're cleaned, they're lost. And so Kathy finds routinely very impressive organic material, textile equipment in the corrosion of the bronzes, organic material that's preserved. And so I can't give them enough credit for doing that. And that's been the stimulus of all of these other projects that are asking them to collect this material. So and the third is the preservation of sites and objects, and broadly covering the care and curation not of the work we do, but also, very important, the analog and digital records that arise from this work. So you've not only got the material now from sort of 15 or 18 projects that are stored there, but you've also got all of the analog, the traditional paper records, digital film records, but now since 2004 or so, all the born digital records. So when you excavate, think of all the material that you collect. And all of that has to be collected, stored, it has to be migrated as technology software develops. And so that's one of the fundamental challenges to, I think, archaeological and research centers like ours, is how do you preserve not only the antiquities, but how do you care for them? And you see Kathy's, these storage systems they developed for the metal objects. But how do you take care of all the born digital data? And that I think is going to be the challenge for the next generation of archaeologists, because it'll be lost. It's not tangible. You can't store the drawings anymore. You can't store the film records. And as you can just imagine, how many terabytes of storage are needed just to store Crony Papadopoulos' photographs, okay? And you have various, what we're finding is one of the challenges is you've got 15 different excavations, 7 different recording systems. Some of them use, when you want to create finding aids to find material in the building, we've got one team that uses a catalog number this way, another team uses a catalog number that way. Our photographer then has to keep the 5 different systems going. And so that is also a challenge, is melding all of these different recording systems into one sort of unified system. So last but not least, like the research unit, we're very interested in publication and outreach. And I think you see that here. And this is the final step in our heritage program, and it concerns efforts to share new discoveries from the Greek past with the wider scholarly community and the local and foreign lay audience. The work includes the Study Center's newsletter, Kendro. The latest, I think the 21st or 2nd issue is about to come out at the end of the month. Our annual summer lecture series. This year we had the best ever. We had 6 or 7, and we've already invited Lena and to speak next year. And anyway, I'm looking forward to it. Every year the staff also provides tours to student groups from Greek, European, and North American universities. That can vary between 10 and or more, and at least 10 primary and secondary schools in the Arapatra municipality. And there our staff has developed a whole program. It takes 2 or 3 hours for each of these visits, and 3 or 4 of the staff members stop work and they take the kids through it. And it's sort of how to become an archaeologist. That's the focus. And they've got boxes, they have drawings they make, they take photographs, they excavate inside sand, they look for organic materials, and I think that program we're almost a victim of our own success because we have to turn away. The problem is everyone wants to come on between May 15th and May 30th. The entire school system has the same 15-day window to do their trips. That happens to be the same day all of our projects start arriving. So there's just too many people. So we try and spread them out earlier. But in any case, there's just tremendous demand for that locally, and we're very proud of doing that. So we also work closely with our colleagues in the PORPHYRA to improve public access. We've installed paths at some of the sites where we work. That was a big part of our centenary celebrations in 2000 with English and Greek sites. We've also helped with the signage in some of the new museum displays. The Satia Museum, the Raptor collection there are 3 of the museums we've tried to help in those cases, particularly when some of the material from our projects is going to be included in the new displays. And so altogether, we're very proud of all these efforts because they have the potential to impact the widest audience and bring a degree of closure to the projects that we've supported. And that's always interesting, too, for foundations, is that there is an end game. The excavation doesn't just go on forever. So with that, I want to thank everyone and move on to the next topic.
So we now move to the actual conference, but the second speaker is also not here, but she has, this is Carmen Alfaro Guinier from the Department of Ancient History at the University of Valencia. But Dr. Alfaro has also has sent her presentation, which will be read by Dimitra Milona. The title of her presentation is The Production of Purple Dye in the Western Mediterranean During the Historical Period.
Carmen sent us her notes. I'm afraid I will read the notes. I'm afraid it will not be as charming as if Carmen was speaking, because she's a very good speaker. Anyway, here you see a rather, before I start, the idea of Carmen's presentation was to give us a taste of what purple dye production feels like in the western part of the Mediterranean, where it is a very big issue and very well studied. So the idea was for her to give us a point of comparison. So Carmen says, here you see a rather famous map of the distribution of purple dye workshops in Mediterranean as it was understood in 2003. Today we know that this map is not complete, but nevertheless it provides a useful starting point in our discussion. In the map, the Eastern Mediterranean is richer in evidence for purple dye production. But now we know that in the western part, more dots should be added. Visibility of purple dye production, of purple dye workshop sites, is often hampered by changes in the sea level that have occurred since antiquity. In some areas, this affected the configuration of the coastline considerably. On the island of Ibiza, for example, since antiquity and even today, the shores of the eastern part of the island sink gradually, while those of the western part rise. For this reason, the workshops on the eastern part are much closer to the sea. Some of them are even partly submerged into the sea. Thus, they become difficult to locate. The beginning of the Western Mediterranean purple dye production was linked to the colonization process that, following previous contacts, developed more intensely since the 8th and the 7th centuries BC. Very quickly, I show you here an important area in the introduction of Phoenician traditions to the West. The Hercules Melkart sanctuary in Sancti Petri Islands in the area of Gadir. It dates to the 11th and 10th century BC, a mixture of rich cultures of the late Bronze Age, in the area surrounding Gadir, and the Phoenician presence on the coast can explain a very rich fish salting activity in the area. Today, it is thought, because Gadir was an area very famous for its salt fish. Today, it is thought that in these same areas where many purple shells concentrations are found, the art of purple dye making was probably also introduced by the Phoenicians. We can speak about two parallel ways in the cultural colonization of the Western Mediterranean. The Greek one, along the coasts of the North Mediterranean coasts, and the Phoenician and Punic one, following the southern coasts. From Lebanon and Phoenicia to the so-called columns of Hercules between Morocco and Spain today, including the Balearic Islands. In Spain, the Phoenician colonization was more intense than the Greek one. In their travels to the west, Phoenicians left considerable remains, material remains, in sites which are rich in purple shell remains. Between others, we have Vesperides in Libya, Menings on the island of Gebra, possibly Malta, Western Sicily, Pityusas Islands, and perhaps in some places in the southeast of the Iberian Peninsula. Curiously, the purple shells that are found archaeologically on these locations in southeastern Spain date to the Roman period. But all the sites where we find evidence for purple dye production have a solid evidence for earlier Punic industrial activity, in most cases pottery making, which persisted from the early days to the Roman times. In any case, it's clear that the Punic presence in southern Spain and the Pityusas Islands served as a basis for later activities related to purple. In the southeast of the peninsula, of the Iberian Peninsula, from Gadir, where we have 5 workshops, the workshops 1 to 5, to Carthago Nova, today's Cartagena, the written testimonies for purple production are scarce, but here on the landscape, large quantities of purple cells are found. And this is of interest to us. All of them appear in Roman imperial facilities, basically dedicated to the manufacture of salted fish and fish sauces, what is known as setarie, activities which have a clear Phoenician and Punic tradition and which is very well studied. The question is whether at different times of the year when fish processing was slack, purple dye could be produced in these large workshops. The setarie and purple dye workshops can be viewed as complementary industries, since salting occurs in spring and summer when tuna and sardine migrations take place, and purple dye is produced in autumn, October and November. Relevant studies in this area are lacking. At the moment, 13 archaeological workshops with significant amounts of purple cells are known. They date mostly between the 1st and the 3rd centuries AD, but some reach up to the 5th century. Not all workshops bear testimony for both activities. From my experience in Ibiza, one of the Pityusas Islands, I believe that the workshops for purple dye were very simple. You needed to have fire, cauldrons supported by metal tripods on the fire, in which the amounts of cells fresh was processed. So that wouldn't leave very considerable traces. On sites number 14 and 15, the Aguilas and Carthago Nova, both the Punic and the Roman traditions are present. The fish salting factory in Aguilas was founded in the time of Augustus and was active until the end of the 1st century AD. In it, a large amount of purple cells in a deposit 33 centimeters thick was found. It was made up mostly of crushed Murex Trunculus. In this case, we even have written testimony for the existence of such a mixed workshop near the shore here. The malacological remains of Carthago Nova dates to the last third of the 3rd century, up to the 1st century BC, up to the 1st century AD, and has Iberian, Punic, and Roman faces. This site produced very few purple cells in the area of the Roman amphitheater and the hospital square, and among these few cells, only about 40% belong to purple shells. So we cannot really say that those were remains of purple dye industry. Probably they were food leftovers. But Dr. Rees, David Rees, sent us a letter from the archaeologist Perez Reverte with a summary of his analysis of the purple shells that were contained in an amphora found in another part of the city in the 70s. According to him, 52% of the contents of that vessel were Murex Trunculus purple shells, 40% were Stramonita emastoma, and about 8% were Bolinus brandari. So we have a clear purple shell assemblage. North of Carthago Nova, to Dianium, there are also some sites where purple shells have been found. In Lucentum, today's Alicante, was detected one workshop which has not been studied so far, unfortunately. Regrettably, in this area, only few studies have been undertaken, so we really don't know much about what was happening here. Since the days of my doctoral thesis, that was published in 1984, I was aware of the existence of imperial vaphia, which are cited in Notitia Dignitatum, a late imperial source, an official document concerning military and civil administrative functions of the big centers of production in late Roman Empire. This source offers information on the state control of certain types of purple dye production centers, and this was a strong reason for me to start a serious investigation in the Balearic Islands, looking for the infrastructure of the purple dye workshops in that territory. And back in those days, this was a really innovative approach. Only much later, in 1999, things fell into place and allowed me to start the real investigation. I was blessed with the collaboration of my colleague Benjamin Costa, an archaeologist who was working at the Archaeological Museum of Ibiza, and he is the director of the museum now. And also I was lucky to receive financial support from the University of Valencia, where I became a professor. The work which I carried out in the area since 2000 gave us the conviction that the imperial vaphia from the Notitia Dignitatum was situated on the Pythiusas Island, which is Ibiza and Formentera, these two islands, the southernmost of the Balearic Islands, with a strong Phoenician and Punic presence. Were the Balearic Islands of the north, Mallorca and Menorca, also part of the imperial vaphium mentioned in the Notitia Dignitatum? We believe that they were not. Only the presence of some workshops on Cabrera Island, south of Mallorca, could be considered a relevant find. I was convinced that the 6 purple dye workshops that were known in Ibiza at the time were an important indicator of the dominance of this particular island, Ibiza, in the field of purple dye production. The presence of Phoenician and Punic culture was very intense on the island. The representative Punic cemetery of Puig de Molins in Ibiza city gave a big quantity of objects, of Phoenician and Punic objects that are kept at the Monographic Museum, which is situated over the necropolis. All over the island, a lot of Punic sites and materials are to be found. In Roman times, the Roman times from the 1st to 3rd century AD, but especially the final years of the Roman Empire, witnessed the flourishing of purple dye production here. Of course, not all purple dye workshops are contemporary. In 2005, we discovered 3 more workshops. I'm sorry. This is the slide from the cemetery. In 2005, we discovered 3 more workshops to add to the ones I showed you earlier. And here in this list, the new workshops are the ones in green. We have now worked in the area from 2001 to 2014. 2 initial projects focused on purple production workshops and 2 subsequent ones on agro-pastoral activities. Wool production in this geographical area, which is associated with purple production, was a point of particular interest for obvious reasons. Since 2006, after a survey throughout the shores of the two islands, we know that there were more than 40 places around the coasts that were related to purple dye production. One important question: were all these workshops functioning at the same time? At the moment we don't know, because only 3 of them have been excavated. And I'll show you these 3 excavated cases now. The most important of them is called Canal den Marty, in the northeast of the island, which is number 4 in the general map. 2 little calas, 2 little channels, which one led to small streams. 3 sectors have been located here, of which 2 and 3 have been excavated, and you see the locations on this photograph. It is the largest and richest of the workshops studied. Its operations start from the High Imperial times, beginning on the 2nd century AD, with a dynamic production in the mid-3rd century and an intense development in the 4th century. The malacological, here is another view of the excavated sites. The malacological remains overlap strata with different content: common Roman Ebusitan ceramics, amphorae, nails, etc. The latest dates for these finds is the 5th or the 6th centuries AD. Sector 3 had a deep deposit of purple shells, and it's dated by a coin issued by Theodosius in 388 up to 395. This coin was actually found within an Murex Trunculus shell in this sector. Here is a list of the mollusks that were found there, and what is worth noting is actually the first line. This MT there stands for Murex Trunculus. This is the Murex Trunculus, and you see that over 90% of this assemblage is this shellfish. These shells were found compacted in a large vat at a location which is now 20 meters above sea level. Here you see that the vat after the excavation, and here is a cross section of it. The remains indicate a survival of the workshop through to the 5th century. The third site, the third excavated site, is at Cala Olivera. This represents a space 8 by 3 square meters, which was excavated. The workshop sits on top of a fisherman's waste dump that dates to the reign of Augustus and Tiberius. The site was abandoned, reoccupied, as we see from its rudimentary architecture. It is a small workshop that was abandoned on the 4th century. Here we have a more balanced combination of Murex Trunculus and Stramonita emastoma shells, but there is no Bolinus brandaris at all. In the days of Alexander Severus, the production of purple becomes a monopoly of the state, and the rules for the workings of the purple fishermen corporations were modified, and fishermen lost privileges and rights. As I mentioned earlier, the Notitia Dignitatum is an official document concerning military and civil administrative functions of the big centers of production in the late Roman Empire. It refers, among others, to vathia for purple dye production, installations, and dyeing works. These were controlled by 2 functionaries, by 2 high-level functionaries, one Comes Sacrarum Largitionem for the Eastern Mediterranean and another one for the Western. This document was compiled gradually from 394 to 425 AD. The different places and persons that are mentioned are well detailed. The Vafia locations are mentioned only by geographical name without explanations, and the persons responsible for the functioning of each within is described with a description of his task. In this case, the Vafia case, the person is described as Procuratores Vafiorum. I will finish here by showing you, this slide shows the Vafia that are mentioned in this document in the order they appear in the document. And Carmen would like to close the presentation by showing us these illustrations, which are from the Bodleian copy of the Notitia Dignitatum, which the manuscript seems to reproduce much older texts and images. And please note all the purple colors in these illustrations. I'm sure she would thank you now.
Thank you very much. It's now time for coffee. Coffee is upstairs. Please be back at 11:30. Thank you.